Hello and welcome back, guys, to another Improvement Season podcast. It is me, Pascal Steve, and on the other end is Steve. I was just thinking, Steve, where are we at right now? But of course, last week and the week prior to that, it was only last week that we didn't talk. It wasn't the new year, it was Christmas period. How many kilograms are you now above everything after then the Christmas holidays?
Yeah, it's funny. The funny thing is, because I bought a portable scale to take to Brooklyn to have available, because I thought that data would be helpful for peaking for a few days, and then also it would help keep me accountable post-show. Accountable in some ways to not overdoing it, but also doing it enough. It kind of, at least for me, it provided me confidence to continue eating the way I was and eating plenty, which was good. So I took that scale with me to my parents-in-law, basically, because that's where we go and celebrate Christmas. I normally don't bother taking a weighing scale, but I was like, hey, I'm in the recovery phase. Also, I'm still checking with Cliff. He wants a weekly weigh-in, so I have that data available. And my weight pretty much maintained the entire time I was out there. In fact, Cliff bumped my calories up, and I saved one of my refeeds because Cliff still was giving me refeeds from the week before. I saved it to have that week. So I had a double refeed and I had a bit more food, and my weight kind of maintained, came back and my weight was kind of stable. And Cliff was like, hey, we'll just keep things level this week. So this week that was last week. And I expect next week we'll have to bump up your food. But my weight then just jumped. I don't know if you ever get this, Pascal. And actually, we definitely get it, where people going to get what I kind of quote unquote call it like a growth spurt. Or like you see this delayed fat loss effect sometimes where someone has a whoosh. It's like the opposite of that, where someone's kind of maintaining and then they just suddenly go whoop, and then they maintain that higher weight. So yeah, week on week, I'm like hovering around 175 pounds, where I was around 173. So I have kind of gained a kilo, and I don't really know why or how or anything, because I mean, you know me, Pascal, after like so many years, it's not like I'm binging on Christmas Day or Boxing Day, and I still had my weighing scale was on the Christmas table, I'll put it that way.
Oh, really? Was it?
Yeah, to that degree. I just thought the degree of stress of having it there is very minimal. Actually, it's less stress to weigh it out. And I was like, I'm thinking about what I'd advise a client. And in that post-show recovery phase, if it's low stress, for them to be able to be a bit more accurate and precise, why not do it? So
totally. Yeah. And also, if it doesn't really stress your environment or causes any kind of friction,
they're used to me by now.
Sometimes it's just kind of a character trait of the person. Like, just think about it. If you are a smoker, you're then going to take a break, going outside, smoking a cigarette. And for you, it's just like having the scale on the table. Maybe that's the worst kind of analogy or thing to compare it to. But I think, once again, what's the stress,
like last year, I didn't weigh out my Christmas dinner. It was the same, but I was peak mass. Whereas this is like just post show. So the only difference is before I put the turkey or the potatoes on my plate, I put them on a plate that was on my scale, and then I put them on my plate. That's the only difference. And then I, rather than mindfully kind of going about it, being in a very well-fed state where I could be a bit more mindful, because I'm in like a post-show hungry Steve period. It's like, hey, this keeps that like, I always talk about like a dog on a leash, keeps that leash on a little bit so I don't go wild, because I definitely could, because I said to Charlotte yesterday, you always can tell, or not yesterday, the day before, you can always tell when I'm like hungry and not well-fed, or in a position where my body feels that way. I'll keep picking at vegetables. Like when there's like an all-you-can-eat and there's veggies in front of you, I'll just keep picking at them because I'm like, I'm still hungry, so I'm just going to eat a bit of that.
Yeah.
Because it's a way of moderating it.
But once again, I mean, if it's not really coming as a surprise and all of a sudden you have like, I don't know, some weird behavior around others, and others can't really explain as to why you're behaving a certain way, and they understand also where it is that you're coming from. So it's not unusual behavior that does impact your environment. I don't see anything wrong in that.
Yeah.
Especially because it's not kind of coming from a place that is neurotic.
Yeah, it's kind of, I was talking to a client about this. I'd actually be interested in your thoughts, and you could probably do a whole podcast where it's a long-term client. And I was just said to them, they've never expressed to me that they don't like tracking. And we've had holidays, Christmases, where they all go through periods of time of mindful eating, not tracking, and this sort of thing. And very much like, it's not you either track or you don't. It's like move within this space to what suits your goals and what's appropriate for the level of stress and that sort of thing. And I was just like, we've never had periods of time of just like no tracking for extended periods of time in your gaining phase. Is that something you want to try and do? And they just came back to me like, hey, I'm fine for that short periods of time, like holidays, Christmas, what have you. But I want to take bodybuilding to the highest level, and I like the degree of precision, and it's not a big stressor to me. And that's the kind of way I view my nutrition too, is like, yeah, I mean, there's times I can not track and be completely just mindful when I'm well fed, and like in a holiday period, I don't have to be that precise. But when I can be accurate, I think that's more likely to lead to the result I want. And it doesn't stress me, so I'll do that. So that's kind of, I don't know if you ever think about that way, just like have
So the way that it sounds to me is more like calculating the risk reward in that regard. So is the benefit greater than the potential downside to it? And because tracking isn't really having that much of a negative impact on the vast majority of people, it can, for sure, we can think probably of quite some examples where this then leads to neurotic behavior, to stressful behavior, amongst others, to very much problematic behavior overall. But the vast majority of people that we are working with have I wouldn't say a fairly good understanding, but they are in a reasonable spot. We don't really often attract the clients that are having some eating disorder. Sometimes that may very well be the case, but often in a situation like yours, the one that you're describing, weigh the risk against the rewards, and then you can test things out for yourself, because sometimes it may even be worth taking the shot, taking the risk, in order to get an exponentially higher return, so to speak. Because then you may realize, all right, that wasn't too bad. I'm actually having a better time here. I'm more flexible, less stressed overall, and I'm still seeing the same results. That's a win. And sometimes you can only figure that one out if you are giving it a shot, an honest shot.
Yeah, that's kind of the analogy I used in terms of using the sat nav to get to a destination. Like, that's how you know you're going to get there, probably in the most efficient time. But hey, maybe you decide to try a different route and you learn something from trying that route, whether that be, I don't know, it's really low stress, or you saw the world in a different way because you saw a different scenery on the journey, and it was worth maybe it being a little bit less efficient for a little bit more enjoyment. And so it's like, hey, so generally when I want to be efficient, I go down this route, but now and then it's okay. And I'm like, okay to use this other. And I think, like everything, it's just a tool. Something I rarely do with clients is get them not to weigh in. Like, that's part of our process. Like, we primarily help people gain muscle, lose fat. Big part of that is scale weight adjustments. But the scale was stressing him very, very clearly. So I was just like, we're removing it. We're just going to take a waist measurement, and we're going to track your performance. Everything else is we've been tracking, and we're going to remove the scale weight. And because it had been going up rapidly to some extent, but he was very much in like a very dieted, fatigue state, prolonged. So it's just like, let's remove that because it's stressing you. That tool is no longer appropriate. It's not providing us a benefit. It's actually taking away from the process. It was making him increase his steps when we're trying to decrease them, that sort of thing. So it's like, use the tool appropriately in your toolbox, I think, is what we're essentially saying.
Yeah, and also my methodology when it comes to supplementation, you do remember kind of this supplemental triangle, you know, where then in one corner it's kind of cost, time, so how much time it is that you need to invest in order to then take the supplements, and also then the benefits. And you can apply the same principles to tracking tools as well, where then if you need to spend a lot of time and it costs you a lot of effort while the benefits to you are fairly minimal, then it may not be the best tool for then the job. However, something like stepping on the scale, how much time does it actually require to go through that process? It's done in 10 seconds, you know, and the benefits greatly outpace then the downsides most of the time, unless you have a very negative kind of relationship with your body image or anything, well, even with the number on the scale. But for the vast majority of people, the cost of time, 10 seconds out of your day, and what it is that you may then receive in return greatly outpaces any kind of downside.
For sure.
So and the same goes for something like tracking macros, in my personal opinion, especially when you are skilled and trained in doing that.
Yeah, it's like logbooking your training. It's like, maybe you want to not logbook sometimes because it's like freeing for you. But if you really want to know that you're gaining muscle, you want to see those numbers going up. So you probably want to logbook most of the time.
Yeah, most of the time, if you really boil it down, it's kind of an emotional thing. So why don't you want to track certain variables? Because you have an emotional attachment to it. Because most of the time there's a negative connotation to it. Yeah. You don't want to see a certain number on the scale. You don't want to track the macros because XYZ, because you may not want to see the reality of how many calories there are in there, or you want to enjoy yourself or be with friends, and you don't want to waste that kind of time, which is not wasted, you know. I think that there is a good reason as to continue doing this. And once again, it just takes you a couple of seconds. So there's no real justification from a rational perspective of not doing those things. So it all boils down to to more of an emotional perspective. And then you have to then figure out like as to why you may have a certain feeding towards just a tool, a gadget.
Yeah. It's funny. It makes me think of, I weighed out a dessert that I had. It was Christmas cake. Do you have Christmas cake?
No. Do you mean something like Lebkuchen or so? Or is it like a specific Christmas cake?
So it's basically like fruit cake almost, where it's just full of like all these dried fruits, like raisins, sultanas, a myriad of different fruits.
Yeah. So there is,
and some nuts.
Didn't you have this kind of stuff in Vienna, Steve? The Christmas Stollen, the Weihnachtsstollen?
Oh no, I don't remember.
Maybe it is the same thing because there's also raisins in it and all that kind of stuff.
So it's like that with icing on top. I really like it. It's really nice. It's not that high fat, but it's very high carb, lots of sugar. Like it's got a bit of alcohol in there as well, whatever. Like not much, of course.
I think it is this.
Yeah.
What's it called in English?
Christmas cake.
Okay, it's probably that.
Yeah. It's similar to Christmas pudding, but it has the icing on top if you have Christmas pudding. It's kind of like, not like Stollen, but it's one of those just dense things, you know? Anyway, so I had a slice, and it was a reasonable slice. It wasn't huge, and I weighed it out, and then I like looked up what macros it might be, like, because it was a homemade one, so I just like put in a Tesco one or whatever. I was like, wow. Like that was like, it was like 450 to 500 calories for this like pretty slim slice. And I was just like, it comes back to what you said there. Quite often I find in many situations, people want to be ignorant to the number of calories they're consuming because they know if they try and track it, it's just going to be so absurd. And just similar to like, if you only got a certain size of budget, you don't have that much discretionary spend. If you then go and buy a Gucci whatever, or like a really expensive car, even if you're going to be in debt, and it's like similar to gaining heaps of fat. And for some people, it might be worth it. I definitely think that's fine. It's just don't be ignorant to the fact that that might be where it's coming from. And sometimes it is worth doing that. And I even think when I was in New York, when I was estimating some of the foods there, I probably underestimated, but kind of knowingly did that. But my activity was so high, I was in the recovery phase, I was kind of okay with it. But yeah, it's just some foods, they just have so many more calories than you would ever imagine because we don't eat them regularly. So you just don't really kind of, ignorance could be bliss, but it could also not be. It depends on the person.
I think, though, everyone can think of at least one food that is exactly like this, where it's, if you were to put it on a scale and then look up the macros, you would be shocked how much it actually is that you've consumed. The typical example is something like peanut butter, a spoon of peanut butter, like what a normal spoon looks like. And what you're actually then getting in is kind of double or triple the amount of calories. And Katie is doing, like, I'm not a cake guy. However, she's doing and here's a mouthful for you, Steve. I would like you to pronounce it as well.
No.
Russischer Zupfkuchen. It's such a German word, isn't it?
Kuchen, that's the only bit I can get from that.
Russischer Zupfkuchen. Man, it's a mouthful. But she's doing it incredibly well. And it tastes amazing. And she's already using only half of the butter and half of the sugar that they are actually recommending to put in that shit. And it still tastes super sweet and amazing. And if you're then cutting off a piece of the cake, you think like, what is this? Kind of 50 grams or so. You put it on a scale and it's like automatically 200 grams.
Yeah.
And that then equals to around like 500-600 calories. You're kind of shocked.
Yeah. This is like cheesecake in general. Actually, Charlotte made a vegan cheesecake and I was like, I basically worked out all the macros of it. And I actually, it's funny because I looked at, when you've got MyFitnessPal, it's really great. I looked last year at what I was doing and I was like, last year she made a vegan cheesecake as well. She was like, don't you have the numbers from it that time? I was like, actually, I just guesstimated based off a random vegan cheesecake. Whereas this time I wanted the actual numbers because I was peak mass versus post show. So anyway, I wanted to be a bit more precise and it was actually very similar, but I was like, I can have a 1/10 of this cheesecake. She was like, what, a 1/10? And the slice was like really slim. I was like, this is 300 calories. Like, I'm not willing to have more than 300 calories of this. Like, I want to enjoy it and appreciate that you've made it, but I can't have a slice of the size you're wanting me to have because that's basically a meal.
And then you have to imagine what it is that you've already brought up about people who only can consume 1,500 calories or so because that's their maintenance calories. If you really think about it, they are in such a precarious position that they can't allow themselves to have something like this if they want to be kind of a slim individual.
And that's where you might decide, well, most people gain, I don't know what the statistic is, but most people gain kilos over Christmas. And it makes sense. On top of everything we've just mentioned, there's also alcohol. And people tend to drink quite a bit of that. So you're doing yourself a big favor by not having alcohol, but then it might be worth it. And I totally get that. I had some clients who gained like a couple of kilos. They're like, Steve, normally I gain 5 kilos. A couple of kilos, that's a big win. I enjoyed the time just as much as I normally do. I was a bit more mindful. I'm like, hey, that's great. Totally fine. For me, I'm not happy with, I gained a kilo according to the scale. Maybe I did. And I'm fine with that. I wouldn't have wanted to have stressed any more than I did over what I was doing over that period of time. So yeah, that was my long way of saying I gained a kilo, Pascal.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Did you gain a kilo?
One more thing that I just wanted to add. Sometimes doing the irrational thing is also absolutely fine. And that's basically what it is that you were saying as well. You don't always have to rationalize or have a very good reason as to why you're doing something. Sometimes just going with the flow is totally all right, as long as it doesn't really happen on a frequent basis. And I think that you could even do some countermeasures afterwards or even before that. The problem is though, Steve, and I don't know how or what your experience tells you, whenever you suggest something like this, people actually don't do this. So this is also why when you have someone being on gaining calories or so, and they are not incredibly high, I don't really usually like them to deviate too often, simply because they are already in a surplus. Any deviation puts them in a higher surplus. However, if you put them slightly below the targeted kind of surplus, and they are then deviating, they're actually then balancing things out. So you can sometimes, just as a suggestion for coaches out there or even some athletes, that if you always find yourself or your athletes gaining too fast, just set the target a little bit lower. They are aiming for this. If they are usually getting over their target, they are then ending up in the place or position where you want them to be at.
I've done that exact protocol with people. It happens often because people want to enjoy themselves a bit more over the weekend. And it's like I said in New York, if I was being more like I was not really overestimating that sort of thing, like it's a bit uncomfortable to overestimate, and it's a bit uncomfortable to even Like when you see you've got a number of calories for a day, you're like, I'm just gonna have 200 less and save them for the weekend. You don't want to do it.
That's the thing. You could theoretically do that, but often people still end up with the normal calories instead of cutting it short to then compensate for another day, or they're going down the very much extreme end, which isn't happening that often anymore, at least for the athletes that I'm working with. I have the feeling that there was a time, at least, where people overindulged and cut the calories much, much more aggressively. But I haven't really seen this in a very long time.
And sometimes I don't even like the saving prior to events because it tends to set up massive overindulgence. So I almost would prefer them to do it after. So then they're coming into it from a place of being very well fed and then kind of countermeasuring versus setting themselves up where they're underfed and then really overdoing it.
That's a good point, Steve. Honestly, that's a very good point. Also, I think it requires to have a little bit of self-control. We are often talking about like, okay, be an adult, act like an adult. And if you're trying to cut calories because you already assume and know that you're going to overindulge, I think that there may be something wrong. It should be more like that you're trying your very best to have a moderate approach. And if you're then going slightly above that, that's totally fine. Instead of saving and buying yourself a budget, so to speak, and then still completely overspending.
Yeah. It's similar to like, and we've probably all been there, where you're like, I don't know, there's a tub of Ben & Jerry's. You're like, I'm going to put that into my macros to have at the end of the day. And so I'm going to save all day and then have that. Whereas actually, if you eat a bit more moderate through the day and then you're like, I want some Ben & Jerry's, I have a bit of calories for it, you might be fine with a couple of scoops because you're well fed and it just satisfies you. So there's...
And in the end, it comes down to, okay, is it about finishing the entire tub or is it about the taste of the Ben & Jerry's?
Yeah.
And if it's about the taste and not just like finishing the entire fucking thing, sorry for my language, then self-moderation is key. And once again, I think that everyone could benefit greatly from it because it also carries over into other aspects of your life.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. It's still something, I'm not perfect with this, but it runs back to having a slice of the cheesecake from Charlotte. It's like, I can have that moderated slice and enjoy the taste, enjoy having something that she's made. I don't have to have it 2-3 times the size. What extra benefit am I really getting there apart from psychologically it's enjoyable to overdo it? Because our bodies are basically driven that way because they, especially in environments where you have been underfed for a long time or you're not eating a lot, like the body just wants that dopamine hit of calorie dense food, eat plenty of it, like saving, going for a medium Domino's rather than the large. Like, hey, like if you can exhibit that skill, it will pay off for other things as well.
And of course, for some people, it comes much, much easier than for others. Just thinking about Crystal's podcast where then she said, all right, I was full, but I was never really satiated. But I also do believe that it's probably a skill that can be learned. I don't really think that human physiology, there's such a huge discrepancy amongst people where then some people will never feel satiated or never really have that response or biofeedback. Perhaps it's also then something that needs to be relearned, which isn't easy, of course, especially for certain individuals, that is. But also then with the discipline. Well, it's not just discipline, but kind of that self-control, right? These are things that can be learned. We are not because if we're giving up on ourselves and just giving into that, we are admitting that someone else is in control of our body and our decisions, which in reality is not the case.
Yeah, I think it's getting comfortable with coming back to my client actually, who we've removed the scale, weighing scale. He also described how he's overstuffing himself every meal. And we've talked about this where it just starts becoming counter to actually being productive. And sometimes it's actually worth having the slightly less filling thing to have the tastier or thing that you actually just is your preference. And then you just sit with a bit more hunger or not the stuffed feeling, and then you're like, oh, actually I'm okay. It's okay to feel like this sometimes. Actually, hunger is a normal response. Even in an off season, being hungry now and then is fine, and it might allow you to enjoy this more palatable, more energy dense food whilst not overdoing it because you're seeking that stuffed sensation. It's just like, no, you can sit with not feeling stuffed and like have that burger and chips and that be it, and you don't have to order all the sides and stuff like this to stuff you. No, you just have the burger and chips, whatever it is, or just an example.
This is why, and Steve, I don't know how you feel about it, but you're probably the same when it comes to dietary foods. So in particularly made for the fitness industry, or like protein chips, for example, or certain protein ice cream or anything alike. Because the mentality for the vast majority of people is, because they have less calories, I can actually have more of those without feeling guilty, for example. And then they are running into other issues of like, I don't know, stomach distress because of high fiber content, sugary alcohols. They are still overindulging. They never allow themselves to feel any kind of hunger. So for me personally, I think that for a lot of people who are struggling with hunger or also with dieting, going or opting for those dietary products is actually a counterproductive approach.
Yeah, there's definitely a middle ground to be struck with these things, because you don't want to go all the way down of just eating to preference and doesn't matter what the calories are and you can just have less of it. But you also don't want to go all down the route of just massive salads with everything. You want to kind of, similar to like not tracking versus tracking every little detail. It's like you want to move between these depending on what phase you're in. And it's okay to bump heads with doing it wrong now and then. So for example, like my client, he's just started dieting after we massed for a long time. And he was like, yeah, I went overboard with my fiber. And he actually is, I was smiling when you said chips, because he had some Quest chips, which are like Quest bars, known for the high fiber Quest chips, high fiber. His fiber got like 60, 70 grams. He was like, the next day, my stomach was not happy. And I was like, cool, you just pull it back. You made that quote unquote mistake, and you just find that kind of comfortable middle ground. That's all good. It makes me think of my breakfast actually, which is just sitting here, where I could volumize it to be much, much bigger, but it starts not tasting great. The texture's not as nice, and I don't need to make it just bigger for the sake of being bigger. So I make it, and it's already decent volume as it is. It's protein oats. It's not something I have to like massively volumize. So yeah, you just have to navigate it and find your course, and sometimes you'll hit heads with those bumpers like bowling. You just want to kind of stay within them where you can, and it's okay if you hit heads with them. It's all a learning.
And I think that one of the most successful dieters are often the ones who can deal with hunger the best. And it's not to say that sometimes it's also because they have a little bit of a better starting point due to then perhaps also then the amount of fat cells that they have, them sending a response to your brain of like, okay, we need actually to elevate the hunger levels and satiety levels and all that kind of stuff. Totally. But at the same time, I think once again, it's kind of like a Shaolin monk who's sitting down and enduring maybe just silence, trying to concentrate, or punching a wall and trying to just like push away the pain that you are now experiencing on the knuckles. I think that human mentality can be much, much more resilient than many people, especially in our Western society, give them credit to.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know why, but my immediate thought came to tattoos.
For example, yeah, no, absolutely.
I imagine there's a big variance in how much people can tolerate that. Actually, people joke about males versus females, don't they? And how the men are always worse at like sitting through the discomfort than women. Whether or not there's a gender discrepancy in how people feel pain or whatever, or sex discrepancy. I don't know what the 2025
100%.
term is for that.
But I also do believe that many people would be able to tolerate this if they wouldn't have any other chance.
Right? It's easier as it goes as well.
Yeah, totally. Because
each time.
Just recently, it's so fucked up, but there are kind of videos on YouTube of like the worst torturing methods in human history, and some of them are wild, Steve. And it just goes to show
Why
how...
did you see these?
I don't know. Sometimes I'm watching just shit like this. But this just goes to show, first and foremost, how crazy pathetic humans are actually in their desires and living out certain things. And it was also for pure entertainment in certain situations, right? But just imagine what other people went through, days, weeks, maybe sometimes months, right? And we are talking about kind of enduring hunger up until the next meal of like 4 hours and not being able to handle that. See the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We created the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. Additionally, you get access to our exclusive Revive Stronger member site, where you'll be able to watch over hundreds of hours worth of educational content. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger.
I thought you were going to talk about, I think there's a tattoo shop where it's kind of like torture tattooing, where they just like a group of, like you lie on a table and then a group of like 4 tattoo artists come at you with just like, and they literally try and almost cause pain. Like I've seen people like, that's a thing, and people want to pay money to have that done to them. It's kind of crazy.
Of course, there are people who enjoy that sensation. That's why they are also then putting some hooks in their back and then doing some bungee jumping on it and all that kind of shit. You know, I mean, that's a different level though.
Completely messed up. So how was your Christmas and New Year and all of that jazz? How was it with the kids? Because they're a good age now to like...
Yeah, it was, but it was unexciting. I mean, it was exciting, of course, for the kids. They, of course, got some Lego. We've been building them some Lego on the first day, of course. And the second day, we've been at my parents-in-law. And I'm always cooking, of course, for the family. Something that I do enjoy then. And then we went to the Baltic Sea, spent a couple of days there over the New Year's, but everything was once again a little bit unexciting. For me personally, it's always just harder to be outside of my typical environment and my usual routine. Something that I've always struggled with, and yet to this day, it hasn't gotten any kind of better. And this then kind of carries over often in the way that I am throughout the entire day. But yeah, that is of course my problem and not the listener's problem. But other than that, it was pretty much unexciting. Over those days, I needed to, of course, take kind of 4 to 5 days away from the gym. Nothing spectacular planned in for that. And then at the end of this month, we are actually going on our winter holiday, which is kind of the skiing trip that we are doing each and every single year, which is then also going to be kind of basically kind of 7 to 8 days of no training, but of course, still lots of physical activity.
I already that close of time off training is like, makes me wince. I'm like, I don't like it.
It is still not easy. It's still not easy. And for me, it should be much, much easier than it is for you, Steve, because you have, of course, much, much greater ambitions and you're much more, I would say, dialed into things. And still, for me, it's not easy to get out of this groove because I need my routines and I know where there is a gym just around the corner. So far, the last 2 times that we've been there, I didn't go to the gym. I wanted to do this on the last day. I went there and you need to actually go there on the day when it's open to actually then receive a code so that you can go in there by yourself. It's kind of like pure gym. And I didn't know about this. So I was actually standing at 6 in the morning in front of a locked door and then I needed to turn back again. And yeah, I couldn't really train. But I know this now for this time. So perhaps I'm getting in maybe 1 or 2 training sessions if I really want to. Because skiing through all of those days is very taxing.
Yeah,
very taxing.
I was going to say, at least I think I'd be all right with that, because I know the part of it is just physical activity I like. My body just wants to move and do something, so at least you get that with the skiing. But at the moment in particular, I am just in love with training. I don't know. I just feel like I've never been more in love with it. I think it's just the post-comp and feeling that energetic.
I just wanted to say it's kind of the post-show period. When you don't have
honeymoon.
a blues, you have a honeymoon phase.
Yeah. I'm well fed, performance is skyrocketing, I'm getting pumps, everything back. It feels amazing. So I know I've got a tattoo this weekend, and I'm like, man, I'm excited for it, but also I'm like, fuck that. I just want to go. I don't want to take days off after it.
Steve, I feel you. I mean, I have my entire front section planned as already.
I don't know how you do it.
And I'm not looking forward to that time. It's not so much about the days where you're then being tattooed. That's annoying. But then the time afterwards where you can't really continue, for example, training. It is one of those reasons why probably I'm not fully tattooed yet, because otherwise, why not? But you always need to take some time away from the gym and have an interruption of your typical kind of routine.
The good news is, because it's just on my calf, so upper body, I can train the next day and the day after. It's just then, is my calf going to be in a position where I can do legs? And I did last time I had my calf done. I don't know if I told you, but I trained legs the day after I had it done.
Oh, yeah, I do remember.
I do regret that. Not that it caused any problems, but my foot was just so inflamed. Like, my calf was just like a balloon of water. So I was just like, I'm going to experiment and see if I can get away with it. Yeah, I'm not sure it was the smartest. But after 2 days of recovery, it might be in a position where I can do some like less deep ranges of motion.
And I mean, because it's at your calf, you can always do kind of upper body most of the time.
Yeah, exactly. I can go immediately in and train that. So that's cool.
Which is something that I won't be able to do if I'm getting my armpits done, for example.
Could you do legs?
Oh, I don't know.
But you don't want to sweat either, do you?
Yeah, exactly. The amount of sweat that is then accumulating and all that kind of stuff.
Do you have to do your armpits?
Yeah, I have to, because otherwise it will look super weird. When there's everything is covered, you're just raising your arms, and then all of a sudden there are kind of empty spots there. Don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how often you'll be in a position where your
how
arms
often
are down
am
most
I
of the
even
time.
in a position where I'm taking
Topless.
off my shirt?
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah, so you've convinced yourself somehow the pain and discomfort of the armpits is going to be
It's just so stupid if you really think about it.
Oh my gosh. I can't even imagine, but I'm slowly getting more and more tatted up, but mine is going to be much more slow than you, that's for sure. And I don't know where I'll cease to continue getting it done, but hey, one of those things. How is, outside of obviously the time you had off training, how's it all been going for you? How's your hip, back? We haven't spoken about that.
My hip is actually not doing that well, unfortunately. Yeah, it's getting worse and worse, and it's I've said it already in the past, it's just about buying time so that technology can still advance, and hopefully I can get a, I don't know, robotic prosthetic kind of thing, and maybe I'm getting an entire kind of robotic leg. Who knows? That would be great, wouldn't it? But yeah, it's not the greatest, to be honest. And I'm just living with it.
Yeah. Does it hurt now?
Right now, not so much.
Okay.
But the last couple of days were actually quite bad. But it always now also depends on the way that I'm sitting. I have to really be like, I can't sit narrow anymore. I have to have my knees outwards.
You're that guy.
It's awful because you're quite limited, of course, right? And sometimes I can tell that there's bone-on-bone contact, and then I need to put myself in a certain position. Then it cracks just quickly, and then it snaps probably back into the right spot.
Oh, that doesn't
It's very
sound
uncomfortable.
Good.
Yeah, it's very.
Is this the same place you had your surgery?
Yeah.
Oh fuck, that's so annoying.
Yeah.
I imagine there's actually probably a lot of lifters who have been through this exact thing. You probably looked into it a bunch, so I imagine there's like forums literally talking about
100%. And most of the time, there's no way around getting kind of a hip replacement at some point. It's once again just buying time. Because I'm still fairly young, and most of the time those prosthetics, they last nowadays a little bit longer, but 15, max 20 years. And optimally speaking, you only want to go through that procedure once in your life, instead of having it done twice, because it is so invasive. And that's why you want to push it as far back as possible.
Yeah, so, damn. Yeah. I'm sorry to hear about that.
It is what it is. You know, of course, I wish that it wouldn't be the case, that I'm just like as mobile and as agile as other people are. But that's not the case. So I have to learn to live with it.
Skiing?
Yeah, so the last time I was still trying out or testing out to do another round of snowboarding. And then on the first slope downwards, I realized, okay, snowboarding, I can't do that anymore, unfortunately. So this is where I then switched over to skiing, where I tested it. And of course, still, the glutes are pretty much involved, and also just the legs in itself, but it's not as bad as snowboarding. It just causes my glutes to really get tight. And this probably then also causes my entire left side to actually get some kind of issues, because whenever I'm training the posterior chain and I'm having a great kind of RDL session, for example, right, and my glutes are being targeted very, very well, then I can promise you and guarantee you that I'm actually in more agony the next couple of days, because there's also one section of my glute that is chronically super tight. Whenever I'm touching on it, it just doesn't really feel great, right? And I'm trying my best to actually, in quotation marks, loosen it up, and it simply doesn't work. And I can tell then when I'm stretching the glute that I can even feel it on the lateral part of the knee, right? So the entire left side is impacted by basically all of the muscles that are freaking tight, because there is clearly something wrong. And muscle tightness is often a protective mechanism by the body. And of course, when your entire hip is kind of fucked, and that system where it's kind of the connective system for the entire left side of your body, no wonder that I'm experiencing kind of pain and that it's not clearing up, because it's a structural problem.
So even if you were to take I think you did it, didn't you? You took extended time off your lower body and it still didn't clear.
Yeah, not only that, but I actually implemented and incorporated like a very much strict mobility routine, and it didn't do jack shit, man. Damn. And I tried so many different things over a long, long period of time, daily.
And the upper body is okay though? Right
now, it is fine. Whenever I'm doing kind of...
Schumann's disease, is that the right word?
Yeah. Right now it's fine, but whenever I'm doing kind of so I haven't really been golfing in a longer period of time due to weather, and also because I was way too busy. But there was always, when I'm twisting and turning, my left shoulder feels like that there's a little bit of an impingement going on. Man, I always realize I'm my body is fucked, man. So yeah,
I think it's just when you've been lifting for over a decade hard consistently, you're bound to have some of these things crop up. And then there's the whole, like, you're powerlifting for an extended time, and that is more kind of likely to lead to injuries than bodybuilding style training. And then it's just how you born. Like, that's a thing.
That's it. This is also why I just take it as it is, because there is no value in complaining and moaning and, I don't know, fishing for pity, because there's nothing that you can really do except for maybe getting surgery, but then it also never really guarantees that you're kind of as fresh. Well, it's not even guaranteed. It's very likely that you're not as fresh as you were before. So you just have to learn to live with it.
Yeah.
And there's solace in it, because many people have it much, much worse than I do. So yeah, that's why I'm not having that much of an issue.
Yeah.
I can still do the things that I want to.
It makes me think of, I just remember there's loads of athletes, right, who are really, really good at a single sport, but then they get an injury, and that could be just down to the fact that when they put their body through such training, one person, they're completely fine, and they're not. And then they have to go to a different sport or something else. And it's just like, there's nothing they inherently did wrong. It's not like you did anything wrong. We could have gone through exactly the same training and you could come out with 5 injuries and I'm completely fine because I just have a more resilient like structure.
Yeah, and that's how the training camps in at least basically back then in the Soviet Union, for example, for Olympic trainees or camps were made like.
Survival of the fittest.
Exactly. So many people were pushed through the same training regimen, and only a handful had what it take to make it through it, and also were probably made for it to go through it.
Damn. Yeah, it does suck, but you're taking the right attitude and just looking at like silver linings. Could be worse. You can still do a variety of things. And yeah, hopefully, like you said, the rate of which technology is advancing is kind of crazy. So hopefully within a few years, there'll be, I think it's Mike Israetel, I will say, he's spoken about AI and the rate it's developing, and he seems incredibly optimistic and hopeful to the point of which he's like, we may not have to die. It's like we might actually just be able to live forever, and I don't know if that's a great thing. Actually, that brings me to do you know Brian Johnson?
Yeah,
is that his name? He's like, don't die. His whole thing, man. He is. There's part of me that really likes what he does, and there's part of me that absolutely despises it. And I don't know where I am with how I feel about him. He's an interesting character to say the least. I don't know if you have any like thoughts on him.
No, because I'm not following his stuff. I'm just thinking that every kind of personality that is on the internet and who's actually getting bigger because of certain things that they are saying or doing, they have just figured out how to then solve the algorithm of the internet, because the currency of the internet is attention. And if your, for example, morals or ethics or what it is that you're willing to do is actually lower than what other people are willing to do, most of the time you are going to be more successful. And I'm not meaning this in a positive sense. I think that the internet has given a platform to a huge amount of people who have mental issues, honestly. And those are the ones, most of the time, spouting utter nonsense and being the ones who receive that attention because they are really fishing for it.
Man, I think you nailed it. And unfortunately, I'll also say social media rewards negativity more than it rewards positivity, like in a big way. People are much more likely to comment something negative than something positive, in my experience. And so along with, like you said, like people know how to play the algorithm, they also know that part of it. And so they really go into people's insecurities and they go for negativity a lot of the time, or just extreme stances. Like it has to be an extreme stance. The vanilla middle ground, we've spoken about it so much. We would be 10 times the size if we were more dogmatic, more extreme in a certain direction. For example, if we even just hated against steroids and anyone who wasn't natural, we would have probably a bigger following. More people would know about us because we were known almost for that. But we are like, I think this is part of the reason you hate social media. And actually, it's something I'm becoming to hate it more and more for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's just getting wilder and wilder. Because of what it is that I said. You have to do more extreme things and be willing to do more extreme things because the currency devalues. So basically the attention that was worth a certain amount, like recently, is nothing worth anymore because it doesn't really, it's not causing any kind of emotions or stirring up any kind of emotions in people. So you need to do more. This is kind of the funny thing is because yesterday there was a friend over from Katie. She stayed at our place. And we just talked about Lily Phillips, the OnlyFans star from the UK, who actually announced that she's going to sleep.
Or something as well.
Huh?
Is she like a boxer or a UFC fighter as well?
No. She just announced that she's going to sleep or has maybe slept with 100 men or 1,000 men. In a single day and streaming it. And the thing
1,000.
Is... Yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
100. I don't know what it was. Right?
Even 100, Jesus.
Yeah. And Katie and her friend, they both were like, why is anyone doing this? And to me, it's very apparent, right? if you're willing to do something like this, see, no one has heard about, well, a handful of people have heard about this girl before that. And now she's going kind of viral because of it. So it is attention that she's receiving. And then in return, that drives more people to her OnlyFans account. She's generating much, much more revenue just because of the fact that she's putting out extreme statements or is willing to do things that the vast majority of people aren't willing to be doing, right? And this has very little to do with empowerment or taking control of your own actions or anything alike. This is purely driven by a certain driver, and that is, of course, monetary incentives, right? And I think this is why it goes back to what it is that I said about if your morals, ethics, and the things that you're willing to do is matching what other people would be willing to pay for, the internet promotes something like this. And this is also why things are just getting extremer. And funny enough, this is also why the biggest influencers, or often a lot of the biggest influencers, at some point, some shocking revelations come to the forefront of like, they are scam artists, they have done any kind of illegal things or so, because often it attracts that type of personality to put themselves out there, who have maybe a moral or ethical bar that is set much, much lower than for the vast majority of people. And that's not to say that everyone is like that. Absolutely. But I think a certain type of personality is being attracted to, for example, being an influencer and all that kind of stuff.
Makes me think of Huberman when you said that, because I didn't even read the story, but I know he like slept with loads of women or something along those lines. Don't quote me on that, but
there are plenty of examples out there, like plenty of examples.
But even for him, just as another, like, again, not shots at Huberman or anything, I think probably in general he is a positive for the industry as a whole, because I think he talks majority sense, and he's obviously incredibly smart, maybe even too smart for some things. But anyway, on his note, like, he's like a professor, scientist, he's got tons of credibility, but then he promotes AG1, and we're just like two guys, like relatively intelligent but not like wildly, no PhDs, like, you know what I mean, just average in many respects. But we're not going to promote AG1, even if it's going to give us money, because we have that kind of moral and ethic of like, hey, this doesn't give the benefits it purports, but it's going to give a ton of money to Huberman. So like, he allows it into his obviously he could probably promote even worse, quote unquote, worse things, but maybe because it has a sense of science in it, it kind of passes enough, you know what I mean? It's like, it's passable.
But also on that note, I think that everyone has a price. Where the morals and ethics are being thrown out of the window.
Yeah. You'd like to think not everyone would. Maybe some Buddhists don't.
Could very well be. But even then,
Buddhists.
The price doesn't have to be monetary.
Sure,
it can be something else, you know? So it could well be, you could make a kind of mental argument of like, okay, the Buddha, or kind of the monk, if he could be Buddha, right, what would you be willing to sacrifice? It's kind of the principle of Berserk, for example, right? When the eclipse is actually coming, you need to sacrifice something that is dear to you in order to be that upper, higher being. What are you willing to sacrifice? It's kind of that ethical question. And spoiler alert for the people who haven't watched or read Berserk by now, which would be crazy, Griffith, he's sacrificing his entire troop. The ones that he's spent years with, only to accomplish his own goals. And I think that when the prize is high, when what it is that you get in return is high enough, many people would sacrifice a lot for it.
That makes me
think. And it doesn't,
of,
once again, doesn't mean money, for example, you know?
On the anime front, it makes me think of, again, spoiler for Hunter, X Hunter, and you know, with I forget how it works precisely, but obviously Gon sacrifices like his whole being basically to get all his power at once right at the end or whatever. I probably gave away the worst spoiler I probably could have, but similar to like the chains with Kurapika, and like he can only use them on certain people. Like I forget, it's like a sacrificial thing. But yeah, anyway, that's a tangent into anime.
And I could see a lot of people now saying like, yeah, no, I would never. Yes, you would probably. Simply because many people are incapable of thinking in probabilities. That's just a matter of fact, right? Many people can't even think in probabilities of like, okay, if X were to happen, I would have to, I have the option of maybe doing Y or D or A, right? Many people can't even do this. They are incapable of doing so. I was, for me personally, I was shocked to find out that this is even possible, that people can't even think 2 steps, maybe even 3 steps ahead, and thinking about potential consequences or potential paths that may open up or them being shut for them when they are making certain decisions. And this is why when someone is telling me like, I would never do X, Y, Z, I don't believe them, right? And here we then have to then disagree, because we will probably also never find out, because you will never really be put in that situation. And thus it is also kind of only a mental task for us to think about.
This brings me back to fitness. And this is why I think the knowledge of fitness and periodization is helpful, because it does make you think steps ahead. You don't just think about what can I do here and now. You think about how is this going to set me up best in future. At least if you don't think about that, and that comes back to our first topic of like eating certain things. Like, for example, spending 1,000 calories on a slice of cheesecake first thing in the morning might not set you up the best for the rest of the day.
That's true.
Some people, if they're that short term in thinking, it's like the marshmallow test, right? You can either have this many marshmallows if you wait this long, or you can have one immediately. You want to be the person that can wait things out. It's probably a good move for many things in life. Delayed gratification. Hey, that's natural bodybuilding.
But even there, we have also things to look at when it comes to, for example, the test about, okay, if I were to give you, I don't know the amount of what it was, $1,000 here today, or $10,000 in kind of, I don't know, 2 years from now, which would you take? The vast majority of people would take the $1,000 now.
Yeah, I guess it depends what position you're in.
If
you're already in a good position, you might not worry about it too much. But we always like to bring it back to the, what's it called? Finances. And this is like slowly, what's it called? Compound interest. Set it, let it go, and revisit in 20 years. But I think, oh man, there's so many things I think of right now on this discussion and basis. I'd go down
I'm always putting it back to other irrelevant kind of topics. Sorry for that, Steve. You always want to bring it back to fitness, and
no,
I'm always deviating from that. Sorry for that.
I'm going to give one more, and actually I could probably speak, I think we could probably do a good podcast on this, because I think this is interesting. It drives into like social media pressures and stuff, and I think it's probably warranted. But for those watching, I'm bald.
That's true. We didn't really bring that up, Steve.
No, because I wear a hat all the time, so it doesn't really look like anything different. And that's why I did it. But that's something I definitely think is worth us doing a podcast on, is like talking about why I did this and why some people might feel pressured into getting things like a hair transplant. It's just stems from, I think a lot of women will be able to relate to this, where like obviously they get breast implants, and then there was like, I don't know, the phase where everyone was getting their lips done, and it's just those, and even just like being thin and slim and all of that, like the social pressures built through social media, and they're now more so coming to the male side. I'd like to talk about that a little bit next time, maybe.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But yeah, for me, it was just, in long story short, I've been thinking, like, obviously people listening, if they've been listening, it's been a topic of discussion for the longest time. I was just like, it's the new year. I've been through a really, really shit year, 2024. It put lots of things in perspective. It's just fucking hair. I wanted to take control of it, so I shaved it all off. This is like a week's growth, so it looks a bit shit now, but you can really see how bad my hairline was. And it's very thin here. I've got a razor coming, hopefully today, like a proper one, so I can keep it nice and bold. and I can
That
be a
doesn't
proper
really cause
slaphead.
where there's no any risk of kind of cutting the skin.
Shouldn't be. He actually, when he did it, it was funny. He was sweating when he was like, he used a razor to get it real short. He cut me twice. He was so apologetic. I was like, dude, it's fine. It's hilarious that I'm shaving my head in the first place.
But I was scared about this as well when I needed to shave off my hair because of the back tattoo. And I was I was sitting there and I was just like, man, be careful with that razor, because it is a little bit of a different thing when there's someone external. I hate giving up the control, right? And if there's someone with such a sharp blade going over your head, it just made me nervous.
It made me nervous because I saw how nervous he was. Like, he was literally sweating. He really tried to convince me not to do it as well, which was quite funny too. But Matt, he tried to like do a short haircut. I was like, dude, it just looks so bad. Fucking cut it off. But yeah, I bought one. I did a bit of research and it was half price. It was like 250 quid, half price. So it's a very expensive razor. But I was just like, this is going to last me. It has like a 6-year warranty. It's the best rated. It should do the job. It's like a foil shave or whatever, should do the job. I can also do like, I was like, oh, I can do it I can use it on my face, and then I shave my forearms for their tattoos and stuff. I can use it for that. And then I was like, oh, maybe I can even use it for like bodybuilding, like rather than having to rebuy shaving heads all the time, I can just use this over my whole body. Maybe, I don't know, but yeah. I'm waiting
let's
for that
cover
to
this
come.
next week then. I would be very curious to hear, just like how you feel with it now a couple of days later and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Cool.
And yeah, I'm excited for that chat. Right,
Absolutely.
Guys, thank you so much for listening. And I want to say, by the way, and I'm sure you feel this way, Pascal, there was loads of nice comments from last time where you were very open about some of the things you'd been going through and revelations you had recently. And I just thought that was nice that people showed support and
absolutely
love in that
and at
sense.
the same time, I mean, I find it nice as well. But as I even said, like, I don't really care, like if they have a problem with me sharing that or not. I don't have any kind of value in it if they don't.
I saw the value, so I can at least say that.
No, I mean, more so, I find it very cool if that's helpful for other people and putting yourself out there, right? But if anyone has a problem with that, with like that one dude who's always coming on here saying like, I don't understand this guy here to the right, and he's still around for like, I don't know, a couple of years by now. I don't care, I don't care. And if someone like that were to say like, man, what's wrong with this guy? Mental issues, whatever, so be it, right? And if there are some people who found it helpful, perfect, right?
If you haven't listened to that episode, now you'll understand everything Pascal's saying by listening to that episode.
Totally.
That last
a lot
episode.
of things then always make sense. And here's a special shout out though to Tanya. You know her.
Fuller.
Also, Miller. Tanya
Sorry.
Miller.
Why Fuller? Why did that come to mind?
She also reached out to me over on Instagram saying like, hey, Pascal, I always knew it. And I can see that. I mean, because it was never really my inclination, but it was Katie who actually brought it up, you know?
Yeah.
So, and even my therapist here last week even said like, I don't know, wasn't there anyone who noticed that before?
I
don't
just
know.
thought you were different.
Yeah, and that's probably what many people always came just to the conclusion and just accepted that, because there wasn't anyone who was maybe skilled enough to put that diagnosis out there. And this is why it was going by for such a long time. Not unnoticed, because of course it was noticeable, but he said that he can't understand that there was no one actually bringing that one up earlier, but probably also because I never really had anyone in my surrounding who was capable of figuring this out.
I think maybe if, like, I don't know, I had a friend who also was that way, or I had for example, if I had, like, I don't know, someone in my family who was also driven that way and that's what it was, then I could probably put two and together. But otherwise it's just like, it's Pascal is German.
Exactly. That's it. He's a German guy. And the thing is, it didn't really help that I'm self-employed. I mean, it helps for me, but it didn't really help to be self-employed since like 8 years and being by myself at home, because how the fuck should anyone then be able to tell something like this? Right. And in my working environments, I mean, it now makes a lot of sense because I always avoided social occasions or going out with the colleagues or eating even kind of for lunch with them. I always wanted to do my own thing. And right. So, yeah. I mean, it explains a lot of things. So,
yes.
Or not just a lot of things. It explains everything, basically.
So if people are interested, definitely check that episode out. Otherwise, thank you for listening to this one. If you have any comments or questions or thoughts surrounding anything we've said, we talked about a lot, do let us know. Thank you always for tuning in. I didn't even realize Tanya Miller did tune in so regularly. So thank you for tuning in, Tanya. It's nice. I think there's probably people listening that we don't quite realize listen so regularly. And for that reason, you should be commenting so we know, because it's always nice to know.
And I would like to know, without Googling it, guys, and this is then how we're going to end the show. I would like you to put down below in the comment section what you think or how you think russischer Zupfkuchen is being written. I say it again, russischer Zupfkuchen. And then you leave it down in the comment section below. And please, please, don't cheat. Don't look it up on Google or don't use any kind of autocorrect software. Just put it down below. I'd be curious.
If I tried to Google the spelling, I think Google would be like, you need help. Yeah. We have no idea how to help you with this.
It's so German, that word. Anyway, cheers, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality and we know how to do it. And we will help you achieve this. The Minicut Movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the Minicut so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing is that you can start whenever you want. The Minicut Movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.